I'm gonna give it like a minute just in case if anybody's showing up. And for those of y'all who are probably gonna be watching post stream, I guess you can just like fast forward like 2 minutes from now, because this is the small talk section. But I think for right now, to add on to that small talk, like, yo, how are y'all feeling this album? Like, J. Cole, off season? Come on, man. Y'all not seeing my mans with this. Like, oh, cool. All right, we got 2 people so far. Hey, what's up? What's up? We about to start up in a minute, just letting some other people hop on, because I'm not about to, like, repeat, like, too much. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about type. I'm going to go from the basics, just in case people haven't been watching, like, the videos. If they haven't been, checking out the Instagram posts and everything like that. And then we're going to build up all of that. So, and I'm going to talk about, maybe if, y'all are trying to hear it, I'll talk about, like, how I even got into type, why I'm always talking about it. Yeah, and I'll answer, like, a whole bunch of questions depending on who's on by then. If anybody wants to know my opinion on their type, as in, like, what type they are, or, what I think about their type in general. What's up, favorite? Stephanie, how are you? Yeah, so, all right, let's see. I'm gonna give it like, we got like 20 seconds before I start off. But yeah, that's just what we about to do right now. So, all right. Welcome, everyone. If you don't know me, I don't know why you wouldn't know me if you follow me. But then again, people say they don't be seeing my posts, which is good because, not good. Wow, I just so totally Enneagram 9'd that. It's good in the sense that I usually think that I post too much. And now I'm like all up on y'all's feeds and there goes Denzel again. But then, that'd also be bad because I guess that, people should be seeing more of my posts if they're interested. So, but yeah, again, if you don't know me, if you do know me, whatever, my name is Denzel Mensah. I am a personality typology, life coach and personal development coach. And my main source, or like my main tool that I use, is personality psychology, such as like Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and all of that. So today we're mainly focusing on Myers-Briggs stuff. I've been posting throughout the past week some stuff about the tertiary function, which we're going to talk about soon in a moment. But if y'all end up posting some questions, if y'all post them like throughout the stream, or maybe by the end, depending on how this goes, I'm just kind of like feeling it out. I'll give y'all like a crash course on what typology is, why am I always talking about it on here, how is it helpful, how can it help you, how can you figure out what type you are, what kind of services that I offer, and then after that I can answer whatever questions that y'all might have. So without further ado, I'm gonna start off by saying this. Myers-Briggs, 16 different types. Now, a lot of people usually go to 16personalities.com to get their test results and figure out which personality type they are. Oftentimes, they will go to the site and they will look at it. They'll answer the questions however they feel like they can, and the end results will give them something like a little gauge of like the E is up here, and then there's like this how much percentage you are an I, and then this is how intuitive you are, this is how sensing you are. These are the dichotomies, by the way. This is how much of a feeler you are. You're like 60% feeler, you're 40% thinker. Then this is how much perceiver you are, and then this is like how much judging you are, kind of thing. And I often have people come to me and they're like, oh yeah, I'm like on the cusp of ENFP and ENTP, because I'm only like 60% feeler, but 40% thinker. So, I don't really know this. And it's like, no, that's not exactly how this works. So, what I would say about that is that, yes, we do have the four dichotomies. So we're going to go through the four dichotomies, but then we're going to go to what actually caught my interest. So when we look at the four dichotomies, that's not what caught my interest, to be honest. In fact, I would say that that's like literally about 20% of what the science, the theory actually is. And on top of that, 16personalities.com does not, if you go look at their section of like how they go about everything, they specifically say they're not going by the traditional way of like Carl Jung's like cognitive functions and everything like that. So that's already like messed up, but they're just calling it certain things. So they're going by a whole different system. And that's why you get typed wrong a lot of times on that site. But the dichotomies are a thing to like help you know what type you are. So the first dichotomy is extroversion versus introversion, E versus I. If you're an extrovert, that means that your mind is most focused on the external world. It doesn't mean that you recharge by being in the external world or being around people. Some types do, but that's not for every type. That's not in even some people, it's more of like an individual type of thing a lot of times. Same thing with introversion, that just means that you're more focused on your internal world. I know a lot of talkative introverts, trust me, but they're more focused on their internal world. And it's almost like when they do get into the external, then they're just kind of like exploding all of that energy. And they're like, I just exploded all that energy. I need to go back and recharge. And it's like, but so that's an interesting thing on how that E versus I thing goes. Like a lot of people just think like, oh, if you like to party, then you're an E, and if you like to read books, then you're an I. It's not really the case. Again, it's like, where are you focusing that energy? And more technically, it depends on what your first mental process is, but that's what we're gonna talk about after we go through the dichotomies. So second dichotomy, N versus S. Are you an intuitive, which means are you more of like a conceptual thinker? Are you more philosophical in nature and abstract, using a lot of metaphors when you speak all the time? Or are you a sensor, somebody who focuses more on what's reliable and what's consistent, what's verifiable? It's not like some type of philosophical theory that you can never really figure out, but it's something that we can actually put to the test, kind of thing. Intuitives are not better than sensors. A lot of people tend to make it like, intuitive stands for intellectual, sensor stands for stupid. That's not the case. If anything, sensors are the ones who have the common sense and intuitives do not. That's just what it is a lot of times. But what I would say is, of course, there are two types for every function. So there's two different types of every function. And again, we're going to get to that. I keep on getting ahead of myself because that's the part that's really where all the meat is at. So the third dichotomy, feeling versus thinking. Feeling, do you make decisions based off of, moral judgments and values and, the people around you? Or thinking, are you making things more based off of like a detached and a very logical type of perspective? Every thinker feels and every feeler thinks. If you're a thinker that's like, oh yeah, I'm not really tapped into my emotions, you need to get help, because that's not a thing. And if you think that feelers are also not logical, that's not really the truth. Or if you're a feeler and you're like, yeah, I'm just not like a logical person, you also need to work on that too. I know a personal development coach, but the one that you pride the most, the one that you're best at, that's what we tend to be, the feeler or the thinker. So that's that F versus T. And then the last dichotomy, P versus J. Perceiver. Are you more of somebody who like kind of like goes with the flow? What's up now? Are you more of somebody who like goes with the flow and you just kind of like meander about your business, you do whatever you got to do, and you're more organized in your internal world, so that your external world could just be kind of like free? Or are you a judger, somebody who's like very decisive and you kind of like make schedules, and you're not really like a go with the flow type of person in general. You're not very like a super spontaneous type of person, and you have to keep your external world organized so that if anything, you can have your internal world to feel free about. So yeah, now I'm actually planning on saving this for a lot of people who weren't able to make it. So I got you, man. So yeah, that's that last dichotomy. And for those of you who are tuning in right now, I'm gonna have this saved afterwards so that if you missed the beginning, then you can go back. But this is where the meat comes in. So those are the four dichotomies: E versus I, N versus S, F versus T, J versus P. But again, that's like 20%. When I first learned about these dichotomies, this did not really catch my interest. I actually got the wrong type when I first got into this stuff. I got ESTJ because I thought of myself as more of a sensible, common sense type of person. And I thought of myself, oh yeah, I'm logical. So, I, answered, the test is always going to give you what you tell it. So if it tells you, like, if you ask you, are you a logical person, and you really think of yourself as a logical person, yeah, but you might not really be that quote unquote logical, and you're more of a feeler than a thinker, then how's the test going to know that if you don't really tell it that? So I got ESTJ, but then when I read about it, I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is not really me. Then I ended up doing it again, and I got ESFJ, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of all right. But then it was Jamila's older brother who was learning about all of this in depth. He's an ISTP. He told Jamila, like, nah, Denzel's not an ESFJ, he's an ENFJ. Jamila comes to tell me, like, yo, I just read about this ENFJ thing. Like, it is so you, this, that. I'm annoyed at that point, honestly, because I'm like, bro, like, this is just another which Disney princess are you kind of test, or like, what Hogwarts house are you kind of thing. And all this stuff doesn't really matter to me, like, it's just like, oh, that's fun. But I read about the ENFJ, and I was like, yo, this is crazy. This really is me. Like, this, I identified with it and everything. And I was like, wait, how did your brother know what I was? But then when I took the test twice, I got the wrong results. That's interesting. So I started learning more about all of this. I got onto, YouTube and everything. And that's when I started learning about the mental processes. They're known as the cognitive functions. So this is different from the dichotomies, the ones that I just went through. Again, E versus I, N versus S, F versus T, J versus P. Those are the four dichotomies. But aside from the dichotomies, there are 8 cognitive processes in total, and every type has 4. And it goes from the strongest, the dominant, to the least strongest, the inferior. So, we're about to go through the cognitive functions. First of all, your dominant function, your strongest function. This is the function that you pretty much swim in. This is the function that ever since you were a kid, you always just like noticed. Like you knew 100% like, okay, it's like the oxygen that you breathe, pretty much. Like I've just always, like, so for me as an extroverted feeler. So like extroverted feeling, Shantae, I love you. Extroverted feeling is FE. Or like shorthand FE for the ENFJ. That's the dominant function. So ever since I was a kid, even before I knew about type, I was always looking at relationships and being like, okay, that works. That doesn't work. Oh, that person did that. That got that person angry. Mental note. Oh, that person did that, and that made my mom happy. Mental note. And you start seeing these patterns, and before you know it, it goes from that one-to-one basis to now group to now whole cultures and societies influencing each other. And that's where you become really developed in that skill. That's the same skill that Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela used to be able to help our country deal with racism. And so it's like, it goes from this very basic level to like now developing it. And that's my job as a personal development coach, teaching you, kind of like Professor Xavier, how to use your functions in a way that it's very advanced and not just basic or even below basic. Most people are using their functions at a basic level, and that is totally fine. But if you want to use them on an advanced level, it'll make your life a whole lot easier. It'll make your relationships a whole lot easier, and you'll be able to tap into your actual strength. So your dominant function is the function that you are most strong, you're very strong with. Your auxiliary function, also known as your secondary function, is the function that you're secondly strong with. However, because it's the opposite attitude of your dominant function, then you struggle with going to this function. So your dominant function, say for example, when I say attitude, I mean extroversion versus introversion. So this is how we decide whether or not you're an extrovert or an introvert. If your dominant function is an extroverted function, then that means that you're an extrovert. If your dominant function is an introverted function, that means that you're an introvert. Now, if your dominant function is an extroverted function, your second function or your auxiliary function is going to be an introverted function because everybody needs balance. And this is why we get people who are like, oh, I'm an ambivert. Not really. You're just a human being. Because if you're an extrovert, all of I appreciate it, Shantae. I love you for real. But yeah, if you're a human being, because if you're an extrovert, every extrovert needs to tap in to their secondary function, which is an introverted function. They need some type of alone time. And then every introvert needs to tap into their secondary function, which is an extroverted function. They need to get out into the external world. If you're only sticking to one of those, that's actually pretty unhealthy, and you're not getting the best out of what your mind is made of. So your auxiliary function is the function that you're second strong at. Your second strongest function. However, like I said, we tend to avoid it because it goes in the opposite attitude of our dominant function. So if you're an introvert, you tend to avoid your auxiliary function because your auxiliary function forces you to try to engage with the external world. But the thing is, especially for me as a coach, I'm supposed to help you to engage more with that auxiliary function because that's what's really going to help you to become better in life. It's going to help you to become more balanced. It's going to help you to not be as exhausted throughout the day and stuff like that. So there's that. The tertiary function, which is what I've been posting about all week. So if you guys haven't noticed that, you can go check it out on my page. I posted the tertiary function and how one of the many ways that it could come out for every type so far. Tomorrow I'm going to do the INFJs and the ISFJs. They have the same tertiary function. Your tertiary function has the same attitude as your dominant function. So if your dominant function is an extroverted attitude, your tertiary or your third function is going to also be an extroverted attitude. If your dominant function is an introverted attitude, then your tertiary, which is your third, is going to be an introverted attitude. We tend to like to skip over our second function, our auxiliary function, and I know I'm using a lot of terminology here. Again, for those of you who are just joining in, you can definitely rewind after I post this. But we tend to skip over our secondary or our auxiliary / co-pilot function because we like to stay in the same attitude as our dominant function, which is our tertiary. And so our tertiary function, if for example, like the one I posted today, an ENFJ or ENTJ function, for me, it would be extroverted sensing. Our tertiary function is not nearly as strong as our dominant or auxiliary. So people who use extroverted sensing as a strength are ESFPs, ESTPs, they have it as a dominant, and then ISTPs and ISFPs have it as an auxiliary. Because even though they're introverted, they still have an extroverted auxiliary process. So they use it in a mature way. But for me, my tertiary is used in a somewhat immature way. Personality Hacker says that it operates at the kind of like the mental state of a 10-year-old. So you don't want the 10-year-old to be driving your car. We tend to go here in times of play or sometimes even in times of stress and overindulgence. So if I'm in my extroverted sensing, now I'm being overly goofy. I'm being impulsive instead of being patient. I'm kind of on the go always and not really taking time to sit back and understand things in my mind. I wish I could post Spark Notes for visuals as you go, but yeah, I was thinking about visuals as I was here, and I was like, I don't know, maybe if this goes well, then I'll probably do a whole class every week. I'll educate you guys on what each function does. And I'll try to figure out like how to put up pictures on live or something, or I'll just tell y'all like bring notes. But yeah, like, so with your tertiary function, you tend to like overindulge in that, or you tend to like, use that in times of like stress. It's not a bad function, but when you overuse your tertiary function, when you're skipping over that secondary one, that's where you start to have the problem. And so that's the tertiary. The last one, Brittany, the last function is your inferior function. Now, people tend to think that the inferior function means that you just absolutely suck at this. A lot of times, that is the case. But in reality, it's the function that, first of all, it's never going to be as strong as your dominant or your auxiliary. But you can still gain enough skill over there to be able to help the rest of your functions there. It operates as like a 3-year-old. 3-year-olds can still talk, They can still walk. They can still do and say some surprising things. But again, you don't want the 3-year-old to be driving the car. Just kind of want it to let it do its own thing, while you focus on the adults. So you have that dominant function, the one that you're most strong at. Then you have the auxiliary, secondary / co-pilot function, which is the one that you are second strong at, but you tend to avoid because it's the different attitude from your dominant, attitude meaning extrovert or introvert. And then you have the tertiary function, which is the same attitude as your dominant function, but it operates as like a 10-year-old might. And so we tend to skip the secondary to go to the tertiary, and then we get in this kind of like loop where it's the dominant and the tertiary running circles around the auxiliary. And that's never a good thing, If you're an introvert, then that means that you're spending way too much time alone and not engaging with the external world. And depending on what type you are, then you're actually really that's coming out in different ways. And if you're an extrovert, that means you're spending way too much time in the external world, whether it's with people or whether it's even with work. Like ETJs, a lot of times, they think that they're introverts because there's like, oh, I don't really like people. Yeah, but you like work, or you like getting things done. You like accomplishing tasks. You like really putting stuff out there. That's what you really don't like. The reason why you don't like people is because people can sometimes get in the way of you getting things done. But you're still focused on the external world. And so if you have that dominant function of extroverted thinking, which is all about getting things done and putting things out in the world and, seeing what's most efficient and all of that, but then you have people getting in the way of that, then of course you're going to be like, oh, I'm an introvert because I don't really like people. And yeah, see, Shantae, Anomaly over there, is an ISTJ. She has extroverted thinking as her second function. So she says that she hates work and people, which would make sense because, again, we tend to skip over our second function to go to our third function because it's the same as our dominant and our tertiary. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. But she is good at work. I've seen Shantae use her extroverted thinking function, and she's good at it. We're all good at our secondary function. It's just that a lot of times we don't like using it because, again, it's like, I just want to stick in my dominant function. But if you stick in your dominant and your tertiary, you're not going to get the best value from all of the work that you're putting out there. So I'm tempted to leave it at that for right now and probably just answer some questions because I know that I just said a lot. And I'm thinking that maybe after I answer the questions, I could start off, I don't know, like doing like a weekly live or something where it's like I go through each of the 8 functions. Like, okay, today's live stream is going to be all about extroverted sensing, which is the dominant of the ESFP and ESTP, auxiliary of the ISFP, ISTP, the tertiary of the ENFJ, ENTJ, and the inferior of the INFJ and INTJ. Let's get it, So that's something that I might do, depending on how y'all feel about that. But for right now, I'm about to scroll up, do the little shoutouts thing, and answer some questions. So wave at people if they're still here. Let's see. I feel like I saw a question that. There it is. Can our dominant and auxiliary functions still be underdeveloped even though they are more primary? That's a really good question. So, yes, there's a difference between talent and there's a difference between talent and skill. Is there a way I could pin this? Oh, look at that. Okay, so this is the question I'm answering from B Morty 1, not 2. So our dominant and auxiliary function, even though they are our strongest functions, they can still be underdeveloped in the sense that, again, they're operating at a basic level. The way that I like to explain this, I have a video. I'll post it on my story tonight. Not the whole video, but kind of a clip of it, and then I'll give y'all a link to be able to watch the whole video. I thought it was kind of cool. I put clips from The Incredibles and everything in there. It was pretty dope. But the way that I see it is that if you think of Violet, for those of you who've watched The Incredibles, she had the ability to put out force fields and turn invisible. When we see the dinner scene, she put out a force field and she was able to stop Dash from running and doing all of that, whatever. That was her biggest strength. But when we got to the part where they're on the plane and the plane is about to crash, Violet was being told by Elastigirl to hey, I need you to put a force field around the whole entire plane. And she could not do that. She was struggling. She was struggling. Whether it was under pressure or what, she just wasn't able to do that. That's kind of how it's like. It's okay, you do this function, you have this superpower, and you use it well, but you haven't learned how to push it to its max. And that's why a lot of times I liken myself to Professor Xavier, because when you watch the X-Men movies, when you watch the X-Men shows, it's okay, the mutants, they have superpowers. They're good at these superpowers. They were born with them, but they don't know how far these superpowers can be stretched. Professor Xavier comes into the picture, and he teaches them hey, Magneto, cool, you can flip around laptops, microwaves, maybe even a TV. But what if I told you that you could also eventually learn how to pick up a whole football stadium? That's crazy. Now, if you want to continue to just flip around TVs and, nickels, dimes, whatever small metal objects are around, that is cool. You're not any less of a person. But if you want to develop skill around this already inborn talent that you have, then I'm your guy to be able to teach you how to do that. So all of that to be able to answer your question, our dominant function is a natural talent, and our auxiliary function / our secondary co-pilot function is also a natural talent. But when we develop skill there, that's where it really becomes no longer underdeveloped. It's now okay, I'm using this at a very heightened level. Again, Martin Luther King Jr., he used his extroverted feeling function and his introvert intuition function, both the dominant and the auxiliary, at a very high level. We have a lot of ENFJs in the world, including myself, who are not using it to the level that he was, but they're using it in different kinds of ways. And that's also what still makes you an individual, by the way. So you can have the same type as somebody else, but the way that you're using these mental processes is what makes you an individual. God dang. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. And thanks for asking that question, by the way. Let me see if there's anybody else. But I guess I do like people sometimes, though. I like being in social settings, even being quiet. Yeah. Shantae, I mean, as you know, if you're still here, yeah, you're an introvert. Introvert, of course, also doesn't mean that you don't like people. But if you're an ITJ, then you probably really don't like people. In fact, most people that you see on TV, like Squidward, Stanley from The Office, that old man from Up, they're the people that you see on TV that are usually grumpy and just really I hate all of you kind of people are usually ITJs, because again, TJ means that you're using TE, extroverted thinking, and that means that you're kind of focused on just getting things done. And people tend to get in the way of getting things done. Now, not only are they getting in the way of you getting whatever you want to get done, but you're an introvert, so they're also quote unquote draining you. So now you doubly are like, oh yeah, I'm against people, kind of thing. But if you're in a mode where it's like, oh, I'm not really trying to get anything done, I just want to have fun, then it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm all right. I guess I can like be in this social setting, but I'm just kind of like chilling. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like how that is. But yeah. Oh, Andrea, hi. God said amen. Cool. Well, does anybody else have any final questions before I wrap this up? I'm gonna try to keep these like shorter so that people actually like tune in. Cause yeah, I'm not really like that big of a fan of Instagram, but I'm trying. David said that I have to try, so I'm trying. So thanks for showing up today, guys, and helping out. Did you ask another one? I was good at it before grade school, though. It's in the question. Oh, there's a question box. If 16 personalities... Oh, wait, does this do a thing? Oh, that's pretty dope. Okay. If 16 personalities isn't a good quiz for typing, how do you recommend getting typed? Is any quiz acceptable to use? That's a good question. Okay. I want to emphasize that I really, really do not like online tests for typing, whether it's for Enneagram or whether it's for Myers-Briggs. However, if I had to give you an online test, so the best way to get typed, like I literally just got off of a profiling session before hopping on here. Some of y'all are probably gonna watch this and be like, what? But it's true. People pay me $100 for me to sit down and talk to them for like an hour, maybe even 2 hours, ask them several questions, take mad notes, like pages of notes, and then at the end, I tell them, okay, this is what type you are, this is why you are this type, and this is how you can start bettering your life in this way, kind of thing. Remember when you said that you struggled with your father over here? That's because boom, boom, boom. So I start explaining these things to them. Remember when you said that you have a hard time with this business and like doing this? This is why, and this is how you could probably fix that kind of thing. So that's called a profiling session. And if any of y'all want to, I have payment plans and everything, $25 a month. If you want to do that, we can run that. But yeah, a full out profiling session with me is $100. And I will break down what type you are after interviewing you, and I also record the profiling session so that you can rewatch it if you want, and stuff like that. So that's the ultimate way, in my opinion, on how to know what type you are. But if you must use the internet, I would say number one, that if you go on the internet and you like learn about it or like you take the quiz and everything, let that be a launching pad to give you an idea of what type you might be. But then make sure that you're like, confirming, like looking at surrounding types, to like make sure like, okay, is this really me or is this not me? Because like, for example, like I said, I got ESFJ and I was like, okay, I guess that's me, but I didn't know that the ENFJ existed, and if I didn't know that, I would have just continued to think that I was an ENFJ. And I see that type of thing happen all the time. Like, oh, I got this on the test. It's like, did you know there's 15 other types though? And sometimes they got the right one, so I don't want to psych them out, but it's just like, we got to make sure, so there's that. But okay, so now to really answer your question, if you have to take an online test as a last resort, I recommend the test on psychologyjunkie.com. That one is made by my friend Susan Storm. She is phenomenal. Like, she knows her stuff. She even would tell you that it's best to have a profiling session, and she also offers profiling sessions. So for whatever reason you don't like me, that's cool. Susan deserves money too, we all deserve to pay bills. Go ahead and go to Susan. But if you want to if you want to take the test, I'd say Susan Storms on psychologyjunkie.com. From what I can tell, I have yet to see anybody come out with the wrong result. Granted, I've seen maybe like 10 people go and take that test that I already knew. And Susan tested it on the Twitter community, who they already like knew that, you know, that was their type. Like they already knew like what types they were. So then they went on, they took the test, and like, yep, it got mine right. Yeah, it got mine right, kind of thing. I got the right one when I went to go take the test. Jamila got the right one. So yeah, it's a pretty legit test. I also believe that the typeinmind.com, so that's typeinmind.com, that test is also really good. In my opinion, if you get the same results on both the psychologyjunkie.com test and the typeinmind.com test, that's probably what type you are. Now again, if you want a very accurate and detailed description on why you are that type, then you should probably invest in a profiling session. That's not me just trying to get money. That's me like, you know, trying to like make sure that you have the accurate type, and reasons as to why you are that type, and not just something that a computer is telling you. But you know, if you again don't have the funds for it, or you just really want to like take it online or whatever, then yeah, psychologyjunkie.com and typeinmind.com. See if you get the same results on both of those. Read the descriptions on them. Susan has really good articles on psychologyjunkie.com, and on typeinmind.com they also have like really good profiles for each type, as in like actual like descriptions. So yeah. Bro, why do I have feelings I'm an ENTP? Doesn't make any sense. Not gonna. Niall, you are so stupid. Okay, anybody else? Or should I wrap this up right now? All right, well, thanks for tuning in, y'all. I'm gonna try to come back next week. My work schedule is always fluctuating, so it might be next Monday, it might be next Tuesday, who knows? But I'm gonna try to stick it to like 8 p.m. And I'll probably post a poll, seeing which type do you want me to, or which function do you want me to address first, like for next week. Extroverted feeling, extroverted thinking, introverted intuition, introverted sensing, whatever it might be. But yeah, if y'all are just tuning in, make sure that you know, I'm gonna save this on my page, and you guys can like go and watch the beginning. And again, I'm gonna try to keep these shorter, less than an hour, of course, you know, hopefully even like just half an hour or so that you can get all the meat from it, and I can answer questions, but it won't be like too long to where you don't want to watch it. But thanks again for tuning in. Keep an eye on my stories throughout the week, because I try to figure out how I'm going to be doing this. That way I can give y'all the best kind of lives. But yeah, this was fun. And J. Cole album was fire, bro. Jacob, I appreciate you, man. I gave you a shout out in my NF's High Key Rock video. Make sure to check it out when it comes out, man. Just so you know. I was gonna let it be a surprise, but yeah. All right, cool. Love y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and done.